With that, there being a quorum present and it being after 10 o'clock, I will call to order the Peninsula RTPO's April 14th Executive Board meeting. I thank you all for coming. It obviously was a busy day for many of us. So I do thank you for your attendance. And as I always do, I'm going to introduce the panelists. And this is for our viewing public. I know we all know each other, but anyone who is viewing this may not know us. So I always do this from how I see people on my screen, and I automatically apologize if I mispronounce anyone's name. On my screen, the first person I see is Sarah Black, and she is the Peninsula RPTO coordinator. I am Beck Ashby. I chair the Peninsula RPTO, and I represent the city of Port Orchard. Next, I see Nicole Gauthier from the Jefferson Transit, our physical agent, and Miranda Nash is our actual record keeper with Jefferson Transit as our physical agency. And I believe I'm going to have to, I think Jason Rowe is with Mason Transit. David Fort is representing Kitsap County. Leslie Snyder is a council person in the city of Bainbridge Island. John Clausen is the executive director of Kitsap Transit. Ted Jackson is with the Port of Allen. Ed Coviello is another our other RPTO coordinator, and he's an employee also at Kitsap Transit. Michael Bateman is with the city of Paulsbo. Is that Randy Netherland is a Mason County Commissioner. Dick Taylor is a, oh my goodness. Dick Taylor is a Port of Shelton Commissioner. And I have to look, see, Vicki Grover is with the city of Bremerton. Mike French is a Clallam County Commissioner. Marty Allen is with the the Skokomish tribe. Steve Polinsky is one of our presenters today from the Department of Commerce. Ben Thomas is a council person at Port Townsend. Rachel Anderson is a council person with the city of Sequim. George Mazer is with the Department of Transportation Olympic Region, and Paul Hampton is representing the city of Forks. With that, I thank you all for attending, and we will move down to our agenda. Do we have an approval of the agenda?
Madam Chair, move for approval of the agenda as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second to that? John? Thank you, John. There has been a motion and a second to approve the agenda as presented. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against that motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved, unanimously approved. Ed, I see you have your hand raised.
Yes, we have one person in the attendee for Zoom. It's a Nick Dosty, I think, City of Swim. So just want to recognize.
Yeah. Okay, is he a citizen or?
He works for the city of Sequim, so he's listening in, and he knows that he's sitting in the audience. He's listening.
Okay, thank you. You answered my question. I appreciate that. Do we have a motion to approve our consent calendar, which includes the minutes from our February 17th meeting and our third quarter invoice for our financial activity?
So moved.
Thank you, Dick. Is there a second?
Second, Mike.
Thank you, Mike. We have a motion to approve the consent calendar. It has been seconded. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, is there anyone who would be voting against the motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against the motion? Hearing none, the consent calendar is approved with unanimous consent. Going down to our item number 3, which is an action item, we are very pleased to announce that our request for additional funding for supplemental funding that we applied for in February, we received approval for that. And we signed with your consent last February, all the documentation to make that happen. And now we need to make amendments to our UPWP. Thera, would you like to take the discussion on this? Thera, if you would unmute, we could hear you.
Sorry about that. I thought I already had. Thank you. So this is, as Beck said, just to go through the final details of approving this, because your UPWP is your formal budget and work plan. In order for this money to, this sort of completes that obligation process, if you would, of moving the money into your work plan with a resolution. Upon your approval, we will execute the resolution and send the final amended UPWP to WashDOT, and this would then become our final billing or budget document for the fourth quarter of this biennium, or the last quarter of this biennium. So happy to answer any questions that you might have. Otherwise, we would be looking to approve the resolution that would amend this UPWP.
And for folks who are new to the RPTO, when you ask for supplemental funding, the money all has to be spent by the end of the biennium, which is June 30th. That's why we needed to act expeditiously when it was awarded to us, because we also had to get the contract signed and paid for the GIS system. So is there any discussion on this? If not, we would entertain a motion. Thank you, Dick. Is there a second?
I'll second, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Randy. It has been moved and seconded that we adopt resolution 01-2023, approving amendment number 2 to the SFW 2223 UPWP to increase the program funding by $21,100 for specified end of biennium activities. That's the motion. That is what has been seconded. Is there anyone who would be voting against this motion? I will ask a second time. Is there anyone who would be voting against the motion? Hearing none, the motion is approved with unanimous consent. Thank you. I'm so glad you approved it because we've spent the money. Moving on down the agenda, our next item, I believe, is the first reading for the upcoming UPWP. And Thera, I believe this is your item.
It is. So you've just amended your last UPWP at the same time that you're going to be seeing for the first time your next one. So as a reminder, and for those who are new to PRTPO, the Unified Planning Work Program, or UPWP, it is your operating budget for the next biennium. PRTPO operates off of revenue that it receives from WashDOT for this purpose. And the UPWP lays out what that money will be spent on over the course of the next 2 years. This would go into effect on July 1. The UPWP is broken out into some basic task areas. And so administrative sorts of expenses are the kinds of things that, like this meeting, and basic PRTPO support, administrative support, website maintenance, accounting, all of your overhead expenses and things like that fall under administrative. Planning is just what it says, planning and regional coordination activities. And we're going to come back and talk about that one a little bit more in a second, the planning. There's the regional tip, task 3, which is the regional tip, and it's pretty tightly defined task area. And then task 4, if you've looked through it, you said, well, there's no money under task 4. Task 4 is something that it's a placeholder for later in the biennium. If we have additional revenue resources available, this is an opportunity for the board to identify some things outside of maybe the core work program that they would like, that you all would like us to focus on. And that's sort of as of funding is available. Now, this next biennium is going based on the conversation that we had with you in February. This next biennium is going to be pretty much all about updating the regional transportation plan. And we're not going to talk about that too much right now, because we're going to talk about that a little bit later in the agenda. But the regional transportation plan is sort of going to be pretty much everything we're going to do in the core program is going to relate back to that regional transportation plan update. We are going to we've got about $30,000 tucked away, squirreled away to do this update, plus that supplemental budget that we just got, that supplemental revenue that bought us another year of GIS service support. So that too will come together to sort of be the budget that we use for this. And if there's some people raising your eyebrows going, how in the world are you going to do that? You just wait and see. We're going to do that. This is the revenue that PRTPO gets to operate on. And so we're going to put that to the best use that we can. The thing I would probably call your attention to the most in the UPWP right now, I think a lot of it, other than that RTP, a lot of it is probably looking fairly familiar to you, but is Appendix A, or what we call our unfunded needs. And these are things that are not scoped out super tightly, but they're concepts that are out there that if there was additional revenue before the biennium is out, these are things that either PRTPO or any of you all could, if the opportunity comes up, these are things that could really benefit the region in terms of our capacity to either do work, so like another year of GIS support, or maybe it's specialized studies or things like that. So these are things that by including them here in the UPWP, it helps to position them in the future, that if an opportunity presents itself, we can point to the UPWP and say, we told you back in spring of 2023 that this was something that we needed support for, and now here's the opportunity. And so it just makes it more competitive. So those items came up from discussions with you all and with staff level, and then also from talking with the TAC back in March about what kinds of things might be helpful going forward. So I call those to your attention because that's probably the biggest change from what you might have seen in previous UPWPs, because that list is changes sort of from biennium to biennium. So with that, I turn it over to you for your suggestions, your questions. Any changes that you recommend today, we will make to the document this afternoon and forward it on to the multimodal planning office at WashDOT. There is a meeting scheduled next week with them as part of our annual mandatory work program review. And so it's possible that they might want to make some changes to it based on that review. But for the most part, what you see in front of you is what would go forward. It would come back to you in June for your final action, and then it would go into effect on July 1. So happy to answer any questions or field any suggestions that you might have.
If you have any comments or questions, please use the raise your hand feature. I'm not seeing any, but of course I have comments. And my comment is, I was the one that questioned Sarah, how can we put together the RTP with $30,000? But she has assured me that this is possible. So we will find out. The other thing that I just want to make sure everyone is aware of, that we have been part of or engaged with the Association of Washington Cities with their GIS program now for 3 or 4 years. And it has become a very important part of the work we do. And you will notice that in this particular biennial budget is not money to renew that in 2024. So I bring that to everyone's attention, that we may need to look for additional money, supplemental money like we did this year. But I don't think it's something that every year we can ask for supplemental money for the same thing. At some point, we're going to have to figure out how we can afford that within our regular budget, or if we need it going forward. I believe it's a critical piece for the work we're going to be doing in this biennium. So I think it was real important that we did purchase it, and we did it with the money that we got back in February and March. But I just wanted to call that to everyone's attention. And I do not believe, do we need any sort of action on this today? It's just the first reading. And again, it's with the understanding that your executive committee will be meeting with the Department of Transportation folks next week. And this is the draft we will be taking to them. What will be coming back to you in June will basically be this draft with any enhancements or modifications that DOT would like to see. So with that, is that all we need on this, Sarah?
Yeah, and unless there are any suggestions or if any clarifications needed. Okay.
Okay, perfect. Perfect. Look at there, we're right on time. And we have a presentation now about the legislative forces driving the energy transformation. And Sarah, I will let you introduce Mr. Polinsky.
Thank you. And I'm really grateful to Stephen Polinsky for joining us today. And apologies, in the agenda, I had indicated somebody else, but we were sort of scrambling to fill a hole here, and I wasn't sure quite how that was all going to go down. But Stephen is senior policy specialist with the Energy Office at the Department of Commerce, and he works on clean transportation legislation. And the reason why I wanted to have him come talk with you today is because there are significant pieces of legislation at both the state and federal levels that are really driving investments in your communities right now. And it's almost hard to get your mind around the big picture of what's happening, because there's so many individual funding opportunities coming at our communities all at once. And so Stephen works in this arena, and I thought that he could help just give us an overview of what these big programs are, how they relate to each other, and then importantly for you all, how can you help your communities sort of be prepared for these opportunities that are going to be rolling at you over the next, I'm going to say decade at least. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Stephen. And Stephen, if I understand right, you would like to, we'll do the presentation and then we'll have some time at the end for questions and discussion. Does that work good for you?
That's great.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much for doing this. I'm going to turn it over to you now.
All right, tell me what you're seeing. Are you seeing my splash slide?
I am seeing yours. Yeah, I am. Yes.
Okay, super. Well, thank you for allowing me to be here, and thank you for doing what you do. I don't know how many of you as a child thought about your future and thought, I really want to be a transportation policy leader, but and especially if you knew what that entailed. But here you are, and whether you're elected or appointed or paid or a volunteer, the work that you're doing is absolutely pivotal to our economic viability, to our future, to everything that will move and what it'll move in, on, or through. And that's what makes it exciting for me to join you today. We're going to go careen through a number of topics in a very short period of time, but what I want to cover, I want to tell you a little bit about the State Department of Commerce. We're going to talk about climate and health. We're going to talk about federal and state legislation and opportunities and where energy fits into all of that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about what the near future holds and where we're shooting for to get to the far future. I am in the State Energy Office, which is housed within the Washington State Department of Commerce. The Department of Commerce's mission is to strengthen communities. And we have a wide variety of programs and technical experts and assistants who do exactly that. We're working in the housing field, in infrastructure. We recently opened a state broadband office. We have entities that provide grant and technical assistance to small businesses. And we're working in the energy arena and in a number of other areas as well. So if anything that your community needs or is working on, any community, regardless of geography or demography or income level or any of the other ways that we measure ourselves, the Department of Commerce is here to help, and we want to hear from you. You may not know, but Lisa Brown, who was our executive director, has stepped down to pursue some other fascinating opportunities, and Governor Inslee has named Michael Fong to be the new executive director, and he comes from the west side of the state. He certainly has knowledge and expertise and familiarity, and I think we're all very much looking. He actually starts May the 8th. And we're all very much looking forward to getting to meet and visit with him and implement his priorities in advancing the state's economy and health and well-being. The context that we're working in, that's going to be woven throughout here, is the state energy strategy, which was developed by the Department of Commerce in 2021. It's online. There's a lot of ins and outs to it, but I'm going to be referring to that throughout. And if it's something that interests you, then absolutely you're welcome, because there's a lot of data that underlies that. These are data-driven strategies for the state of Washington to implement our energy goals. But we're going to back up a couple of steps and ask ourselves why we're doing that to begin with. And it has to do with health and the impacts of the climate and the impacts of our activity on the climate. We know that climate change exists. We know that it affects health because of exposure and what people are exposed to. And it happens in urban areas, it happens in rural areas, because the environment doesn't respect geographical boundaries. Geological to some extent, but even then, as we've seen with fires and the fallout from fires that are nowhere near you, but smoke and soot and ash and other such things impact people's lives elsewhere. We know that in the state of Washington, we have more hot days than we have historically. We have less snowpack. We're seeing these extremes, and we're seeing the impacts on sea level rise, on the temperature on a regular basis. There's a lot of science behind this. There's a lot of study. I'm going to spare you most of that detail, but we really don't think there's any room or very much room for discussion at this point about the urgency of what's facing the state of Washington. And that urgency requires prompt action, and that prompt action is across the board in anything that has to do with what we produce and how we produce it, and what we use and how we use it. In particular, to get a little specific, greenhouse gas emissions are one of the major concerns, the other being the need to decarbonize. But as you can see, the transportation sector is responsible for a large part, and in some cases, the largest part. In Washington State, with it, we're fortunate that we use more renewables than other states do. So on the one hand, that helps us, but on the other hand, that also affects the amount that transportation contributes to greenhouse gas emissions and the need to address those as well. The legislature has taken action to do that over time and see what the goals are and the challenge that presents to us. We know that, however, that what actions that we take do have impact. So there are multiple studies that are now coming out post states like California and Washington having implemented measures to reduce vehicle miles traveled to reduce greenhouse gases. We're seeing that we can correlate those with increased health and reduced deaths in particular. And that's very, that again, adds urgency to the work in front of us. Some of the things that we're seeing happen, we're seeing Washington State has adopted the need to make some changes, and we're seeing changes happening. Washington State is behind California only in terms of per capita electric vehicle registrations. And the goals that have been set were aggressive goals, and in many cases, those goals are being met. You can see it's probably not too surprising that the electric vehicle penetration follows where the population is, but it's also spread throughout the state, which is, I think, informative and instructive as the state and the federal governments scramble to provide the infrastructure and to address the other concerns that people have that impede the adoption of electric vehicles. So, for example, range anxiety is one that's frequently referred to. How far will a car go on a charge? And the industry is addressing that. There are more vehicles now that are electric, either plug-in or battery or hybrid, and the range increases every year. We're seeing new vehicles come out now with 300-mile ranges, some with more as well. And so there are a lot of forces at work across the country to move towards electrification of transportation. Some of the other successes we're seeing is in Washington State, we're actually leading some of the other areas in terms of electric vehicle adoption. At the federal level, in some cases, the federal government is leading, and in others it's catching up, but we're seeing a very major change in federal policy having to do first with transportation infrastructure as the federal government comes to grips with the declining purchasing power of the gasoline tax and the diesel tax and lubricants taxes and motor fuels taxes. Historically, and it's a three-legged stool for financing transportation infrastructure. It's vehicle registration fees and motor fuels taxes, and then other revenue. But over time, and the Pacific Northwest was the leader in developing vehicle registration fees and certificates. But over time, that hasn't kept up. And so in addition to the need to address transportation infrastructure generally, with the advent of vehicles that don't kick into the motor fuels taxes directly, how that's being addressed is something that a lot of policymakers are dealing with on a number of different levels. I'm not going to go into great detail on that right here. But what I do think that you should know about is that we have seen for the first time a joint office created through the Departments of Energy and Transportation, and you can find them online at driveelectric.gov. And they are doing some fascinating things with coordinating and collaborating the major programs that join to form the Drive to Electricity. Now, certainly they're not the only agencies that are involved. But from this slide, you can just get an idea of the breadth of the information that's available. They have put on a number of webinars, many of which are aimed at local governments and jurisdictions. There are webinars aimed directly at tribal governments. There are webinars that have to do with the vehicle aspect, with the service equipment aspect, with the utility and the grid aspect. There is a lot of information coming out from the federal government through the efforts of these agencies. They also have developed regional offices, and they're available at the regional level, much like, so if you've worked with your FHWA regional office, for example, then you may also be working with these regional folks as well. Other federal agencies are heavily involved. The EPA has a lot of grants, the USDA, a lot of grants, and they have also focused on tribal activities, on rural electrification, because the federal government is dedicated not to not leave behind rural areas, to not leave behind tribal areas, to not leave behind the underserved, the overburdened, and the other communities that need attention and specialized assistance to participate in clean air and in decarbonization and in greenhouse gas reduction. There are two key pieces of federal legislation chronologically. The first one is the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, which is also referred to as the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, or sometimes IEJA, but not very often. And you can see these are 1,000+ page pieces of legislation that cover a lot of area, and I'm sure you've had the opportunity to dig a little bit deeper into them. But they also there are areas where they overlap each other. The IRA is the other one, the Inflation Reduction Act, and it's the most recent of the two from 2022. And you can see a little bit here. They provide a lot of money for direct discretionary grants, for direct funding through formulas, and for special programs that we've come to become familiar with, like raise grants and those sorts of things that overlap and integrate with those existing grant programs and new grant opportunities as well. So it's a lot of opportunity going on down there. Just to give you an idea, this series of slides is really just to give you an idea of the breadth of what's going on and the amount of funding that's available, and the distinct, you can spend your entire life in one of these programs and never touch any of the others. And that's what presents a great deal of a challenge to transportation planners to maximize that. And at the Department of Commerce, we are adding some staff to create an office that helps with the federal grants, that is looking at the federal grants that are available and how we can best either participate directly through organization, through grant writing assistance, through identifying partners in these efforts to maximize the grant funding that's coming to the state of Washington to implement these various programs. A lot of it is modal. The Department of Transportation is set up on a modal basis, and the law to a great extent addresses issues modally as well. So we just are responsive to that at the state level. At the state level, I include the slide for a couple of reasons. One is this was from the current legislative session. This is the gentleman who is testifying with his baby goat in his lap, and it was a nice break from a very difficult conversation, which this piece of legislation has to do with siting a future airport in the state of Washington, and the legislature determined that the CACC approach, which is the current law, had a lot of issues with how it was implemented and how the public perceived it and whether it was providing the best service it could. So it's kind of a case study in correcting mid-course, and the new legislation. I think there's probably wide interest, and it's going to be wide interest in the new legislation because it's really going to affect everybody. But that's just one piece of all the things that are going on. Now, regarding the role of the state in decarbonization and greenhouse gas reduction, you can see how it breaks down here with what some of the efforts that are combined through state law and state funding sources, and and the programs that we've set up in the state to do that. Now on the state level, there are a number of agencies involved in grant programs and in direct action. And you're probably very familiar with the DOT's activities there. And their grants for zero emission vehicles that come through various sources. There are also other activities. This series of slides was put together by the House of Representatives Office of Program Research, and it's a wonderful collection of what the opportunities are in the various, again, set up along the modal lines here. The reason that we get into this in transportation is because, and this is a Nate Hagen slide, he's a very thought-provoking leader in the energy thinking arena. But his point here is that a human by yourself, you provide 1/10 of a horsepower. And if we want to produce more, then we've got to figure out a way to power all of those things. And in order to implement that here, we have developed the state energy strategy. There's now an update available, which is the 2023 biennial energy report. It's online, but it talks about what we've achieved so far in this arena and then what we have left to go. There are key state laws that underlie it. To go back to the Energy Independence Act of 2006, the Clean Energy Transportation Act. I've set out on the right side of the page the HEAL Act, which talks about environmental justice and how we're going to address equity and the requirements to include those. There's also new federal requirements called the EJ40, in which the federal goal is that 40% of the funding go to overburdened communities. There are tools available to you. The Department of Health has a mapping document, a disparities mapping document, which is very useful. I can tell you that it is used in thinking about grants and granting communities and those sorts of things. And they're constantly in the process of upgrading that as well. The state has a goal. There's actually a statutory goal. It's not a mandate, but it's a goal that by 2030, every vehicle that's sold in the state of Washington is electric. So that's an aggressive goal that we're actively moving towards. And the way that we're doing that is that the state created an Interagency Electric Vehicle Coordinating Council, or IVEC for short, 10 state agencies co-chaired by the Departments of Transportation and Commerce. And that entity has been tasked with a transportation electrification strategy, developing the roadmap, if you will, to get us to 2030 and then 2050. And there are right now opportunities for public involvement, both from organized entities and from members of the general public. And so I would encourage anybody who's interested in that to look further into that. There are a lot of grants going on at the state level, and these are just actually compilations and examples, but WSU has a nice funding opportunities page. Commerce has a funding opportunities page. We have one of the major programs right now is the electrification of transportation systems, which we have split up into a few tranches, some of which are focused on commercial areas or large communities, and some are focused on rural and tribal. And a lot of information. We have a grid modernization grant, which is open right now and taking applications. And later I'll talk a little bit more about some of the grants, but I want to talk about the legislative session just so you kind of know what's going on there. This is a fascinating legislative session. You know, last session was heavily a transportation session. And so that meant we didn't know what we were going to see this session. But as we know, transportation is about a lot of things. So a lot of topics that are top of mind for the legislature this session address or affect or impact transportation, if not actually weaving transportation into what they're about. So resilience, cybersecurity, disaster response, disaster management, preparation, mitigation. Transportation is throughout there. Commerce is throughout there. Planning, Growth Management Act, major changes coming to that. Housing, transit-oriented development, maybe. I think that bill may still be on the cusp here in the last week of session. The environment, of course. equity considerations, grid management, siting, manufacturing, economic development, incentives, rules, regulations, inclusion of such things as we're saying there are legislation that has to do with alternative jet fuels. For example, we're seeing legislation include considerations for not placing hazardous facilities on ancient tribal burial grounds, for instance. So I think we're seeing the legislature enter a new era of how it plans, what it plans, and how those include transportation in the consideration and affect transportation. Here's just some bills I pulled that I find interesting. 1048 is the remake of the Freight Mobility Strategic Investment Board, and that's going to involve environmental considerations going forward and long-term strategies going forward. And it's a very thoughtful approach. Climate-ready communities, petroleum storage tanks. There's going to be a fund now for tanks that need some to be addressed that are in the ground. Climate planning. The public transportation fuel, I'm not going to talk a lot about hydrogen, but this is one of the steps and several steps the legislature took in this session, in addition to prior steps, to integrate hydrogen and to find where hydrogen can best contribute to greenhouse gas reduction. And in this case, it's going to be moving big buses. And so this bill helps transit authorities implement hydrogen fueling into what they're doing. 1257 Port Cooperation gets around a snag that was found that was running up against federal antitrust laws. So this is going to improve the abilities of ports to cooperate. Tourism funding, 1783 Grant Riders is going to provide some assistance because one of the hangups that we'll talk about later is it's one thing to have these grants available, and it's another to have the capacity to seek those grants, not just seek the grants, but to implement the grants once they've actually been acquired. The commercial aviation bill we talked about a little earlier, ferry procurement, battery management, 5144. This is a big bill that is going to require us to think about how we handle batteries from consumer toys all the way up to electric vehicle and larger, how those are addressed and how they enter the waste stream and how they're handled in the waste stream. Very forward-thinking piece of legislation. Clean jet fuel. The bridge tolling bill, I think is finally passed, but that's going to be an interesting implementation. And then there are still 3 budget bills, which we probably won't see until Saturday, and that's the capital budget, the operating budget, and the transportation budget, which for our interest is the peer of those, if at least. The constraints to what we're doing, the things that we have to think about, market forces for vehicles, to some extent, we are providing incentives for vehicle changes. We're providing grants that provide on top of the hood incentives all the way. And we're looking at all levels of vehicles, from e-bikes and active transportation modes up through passenger vehicles to small trucks to large trucks to ports and drayage trucks. So across the board, but we're at the mercy to some extent of the market as these vehicles are slow in coming to market or going to other markets like California. And those are things that we're trying to address, but things to be aware of. And the same is true on the service equipment side, on the chargers. The state has taken a number of actions to get chargers not just to market, but to where your constituents and everyone else's constituents can have access to them. 80% of people charge at home, but that's not available to everybody, and it's not meaningful if your work or how you want to live involves going a lot of places or far places. So that's heavily in the mix. The supply chain, the transformers that are needed for servicing equipment, the various pieces. The state, these are all things that the state is addressing. There's new legislation for workforce. There's energy workforce. There's academic programs being put into place. inflation, and then just how you transition your fleets is a big topic. A case study of that is school bus electrification. The EPA put out a big grant call, and there are more coming. We didn't have the participation that I would have liked to see Washington State, and there are a lot of reasons for that. And so how we address that and how we improve the chances, the ability to participate, the number of districts that can participate, and the chances for success is something that is being addressed. Inflation in the transportation market basket is up 50% since December of 2020. And that has to do with the price of crude oil and other issues associated with building highways. So that's going to constrain us in how we can implement the programs that we're looking at. Looking into the near future and the pluses and minuses of what we have ahead of us from Commerce, we're seeking public input on how we can best approach federal funding as part of implementing our this new office that we've got. So we would love to hear from the public or interested entities and parties. We're looking at as the things to be aware of. The cap and trade market is development. It was implemented by the Department of Ecology on time. Very promising first auction, looking very positive for impacts as well. Our transportation electrification strategy, we have a series of consultants on board for that, and that's heavy public involvement in that because that's developing the pathway going forward. Federal legislation created a major grant program for decarbonization. The DOT at the state level is the lead on that, and they are currently they're bringing a consultant on board, and that's a major process to be involved in. If you can keep an eye on the build out of the economics sector. It is in the private sector, it's a calf scramble right now for funding, for public sector funding, for private sector funding, and I think we're seeing a lot of interest in various aspects of vehicle electrification and charging, and a lot of different models, public-private partnerships, SPACs, IPOs. We're seeing major shift in upheaval in some of these areas. So if some of the cities that were really put a lot into scooters and e-mobility, we're seeing that marketplace change. It's not going away, it's just evolving, and that's sort of a natural thing, but that's happening in real time as we watch. Addressing the needs of low income and vulnerable populations and overburdened populations becomes more and more top of mind for state agencies. It is more and more an important item, not just a checkbox, but something to give thought to involve affected populations on and meet with people in doing that. We're very fortunate that the governor's office has dedicated resources to this, that many state agencies have dedicated resources within their areas of expertise. We have a high-level office that assists us with outreach to tribal governments and assists tribes with access to information about and access to agency technical expertise and grant programs and other programs, federal and state grants, a little bit about that already. Watching as this new legislation gets implemented, and yes, preparation for next session, because we've already seen with this session, there was a lot of bills. You know, the later in session a bill moved, the more that tells you that there were a lot of conversations about the details and how we're going to implement, and things like transit-oriented development. We're going to continue to have those conversations, and we're going to continue to find better ways to address concerns of the concerns of people who are affected, and to revolve the legislation into new places that allows us to move forward to meet the aggressive goals that have been set by the governor and the legislature, and that we are all tasked with implementing and getting to, and to meeting the needs of our constituents in doing that. I'm going to stop talking, and let me know if there's anything you certainly more than happy for you to contact me or any of your other contacts with the Department of Commerce. We have regional staff, we have Seattle area office. There a lot of ways that you can reach us directly in person, through the website, by Zoom. However we can best be of service to you, we're happy to do that.
Beck.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Steve. My first question is, will your presentation be available to us or on our website?
I can certainly make it available to you. I think
Great.
what I might do, if it's more useful, is compile the references in the slides, and then that way you can access the underlying data as well. But I'll work there on.
I'll let you work that out with Sarah, but I would like, because there was a lot of information on the slides and we did go through them quickly. I would like an opportunity to read them a little more.
No, I'm not winning any awards for the design of that slide deck for sure, but
No, it
but
was fine. I just knew there was information there and I was hoping to be able to read it at my leisure.
absolutely.
Yeah, that's a tremendous resource, a tremendous
Yeah,
resource.
no, it was great. That's why I want to make it available on our website. Are there any questions or comments for Mr. Polinsky? Mr. Clausen?
Yeah, Stephen, I just wanted to thank you. I know that from a public transit perspective, there's a big emphasis in wanting us to transition our fleet over to zero emission, and our abilities to look at a variety of opportunities, whether it be battery or hydrogen or whatever. But I just wanted to thank the Department of Commerce for assisting in that, both from a grant standpoint as well as just as an information resource for us. So thank you.
Well, sure. Transitioning a bus fleet is tremendously difficult, and it is not an analog to transitioning a consumer vehicle fleet or a passenger vehicle fleet or even a Class 8 truck fleet. And it varies on region, it varies on geography, it varies on weather. It is not a simple thing by any stretch of the imagination. So a lot of credit goes to the transit industry in their efforts, their advanced efforts to work both on the national level and on the local level to consider, a few years ago, even considering how alternative fuels was beyond the reach, not just the thought process, but the actual reach. And now we're in places where the state has created opportunities to do that, and to do that in ways where it's open and transparent to the public, which is a wonderful thing, and where we can each learn from each other in this process. So I'm indebted to y'all and to others who are leaders in this, in getting us there.
I would add that we're going into technologies that are, we're all learning things like hydrogen and fuel cell technology and things that 2 years ago I couldn't even spell. So you guys have been a great resource, along with the Washington State University and others that have helped an awful lot. So thank you.
Well, and hydrogen is an interesting case. Hydrogen cells have been to the moon and back 6 times. So it's not like it's an untested thing. It's just do you put them on the top or on the bottom, and what are the implications? And those are the considerations. And if do you produce the energy yourself? And if you do so, how do you do that in a renewable way and in a way that creates net energy savings and air quality savings? And so it is an ongoing process. We're very fortunate that we have the universities and academia focused in this area. We have the federal government, we have PNNL as a resource. So we're in it, and we're in a good place.
Thank you, Sarah, and then Leslie.
Stephen, thank you. There was just so much information. I'm so excited about getting a hold of your resources. We had 3 of our members applied for an ETS grant. And hey, one second, I just muted him. 3 of our members, and so Squaxin Island Tribe, in partnership with the Skokomish Tribe and the Jamestown Sklallam Tribe, applied successfully for a planning grant, and they're going to develop transportation electrification plans. And one of the things you talked about, the grant writing bill, and if I heard you right, you said that was also going to support communities in the administration of those grants. Because one of the things that I thought was, man, getting the money is the easy part, but then you got to deliver the projects. And so did I hear you right? Will that bill allow support to help small communities also administer these grants?
The intent there is is for us to provide technical expertise and the depth of our subject matter expertise as an area implements a grant. So really, what I intended to suggest there, not that we're supplanting staff or consultants or other assistants, but that we're able to as Area X does their first electric vehicle charging grant, we're able to, from our experience with both other areas in the state of Washington, and because we're active on the national level, we're able to say, you need to be talking to your utility right up front. You need to be looking at options like microgrids, like in Florida, where they developed a microgrid that kept pumping away as the hurricane came through, for example. So those lessons that we're able to learn and share, that's what we want to do as well, and provide people with contacts and other people they can talk to. There are people that we know who are working on a national level on things that are applicable here, that are working in communities of interest or developing communities of interest, and you may not know that this community of interest exists, or that this person who lives in Washington State is a national leader in this area, for example. So those are the kinds of contacts that we want to make and connections that we want to make for you and assist you with.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Leslie?
Thank you, Stephen, so much. So I took a lot of screenshots of your slides, but I also would love to, get some sort of a compilation or whatever it is that you would have to offer. I had a couple of questions. So one, Bainbridge Island has a climate officer now. She's amazing. She's been in place for, I don't know, a year and a half or something. Maybe not that long. Anyway, we're very grateful to have her. And we also have, we have an FTE position open that we're hoping to fill in the next few months for a transportation coordinator. And I'm just wondering if, with this fire hose of information that you just offered us, would you recommend that either or both of these positions that we have sort of get in touch for sort of a private consultation? I don't, just to kind of help direct filter what we may or may not know already. And maybe, our climate officer is on top of all of this. I have no idea, but it just seems like there's a lot that maybe we should be checking in with Commerce on.
We're more than happy to do that. It's hard for me to say where you would really start. Part of that depends on their experience and what they bring. If I was y'all, I think I would start at the regional level. I would start with your regional offices, especially the DOT, of course, but with their peers at the regional level, and get the lay of the land with what people around you are doing and how you can build synergies from that. But I will tell you, I have a Civic Spark fellow, and one of my first assignments to them was to look at the Department of Commerce website and figure out what we do. And they still don't know what we do. So at the appropriate time, when we're more than happy to visit. Absolutely.
Okay. And then my second question, I know that the Puget Sound Regional Coordinating Council is putting up a dashboard to try to help the public and whatnot see progress towards. Does the Department of Commerce have kind of a similar, I hate to say one-stop shop, but a place where one can get an idea of how we're actually doing on our climate goals?
We have regional outreach experts, and they function, for many, they function as point of contact. For climate, that is probably actually going to be our office. We are called the Energy Policy Office, and we're within the Energy Division. Every state has a designated state energy office, and we serve that function for the state of Washington as a division of the State Department of Commerce. And that is what enables us to lead the development of the state energy strategy and the recent update to the state energy strategy on behalf of the governor's office as well. So we're happy to be that point of contact. And then as we determine people's specific interests, if they want to specifically talk about methane or hog fuel or wind turbines and the wind turbine illumination, then we can drive that towards the people with the required expertise.
So there really isn't a dashboard of sort of metrics on how we're doing, or it's just too granular.
I would say, well, there is a dashboard for sure. And in fact, we're this upcoming here, it's called Results Washington, and it's an initiative out of the governor's office, and the managing director of the Clean Transportation Unit here, which is the grant management unit for electrification and clean transportation, is presenting at the Results Washington conference. And I don't know exactly when that is, but as part of that context, metrics, she's going to be providing metrics and a set of metrics as well. One of the challenges in transportation is what metrics we choose to include in visualizations, or what metrics we track, how we know we're doing a good job, and how we know we're going to get to where we're going. And some of the metrics, some are encouraging and some just point up the challenge. So yes, I would say that will be a suitable proxy for a dashboard, but there's no one dashboard that can, in my mind, that could encompass. I mean, it's a challenge. If anybody's got ideas, we would love to put them onto it, because we'll be revising our website. So but yeah, it is important to have that information and communicate that to the taxpayers and the public. And I don't know that I haven't seen one exemplary way that does that in the climate arena.
I'm
Great.
sure that
Appreciate it.
I'm sure that as we move forward with this, there will be plenty of opportunities for the results to be available to us so that we can all keep abreast of it. With that, I thank you very much, Steve, for your participation this morning. Obviously, we can tell from the questions there was a lot of interest and a lot of education done. So we appreciate your time very much. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank y'all for everything you do.
Yes. Moving down, because we did go a little over in that session, I'm going to combine the next two agenda items, our biennial bylaws review and a review of our current operating policies and procedures. These are just kind of housekeeping issues that we do every couple of years. Bylaws, we're required to take a look at them, and it's time. We've been functioning with our current policies and procedures. This will be the end of our 4th year, so it's time to take a look at them. We are hoping that we'll have some participation. Some of our members would be glad to get together for a couple of meetings and review those, and then we would come back in June with any recommendations. So I'm not sure if we want to show of hands of who might want to participate, or do we just want to put out an email? How would you like to handle that there? Or how would the board like to handle it? Is anyone particularly interested in helping us with this review? No one is coming forward. And so you know what that means. It means I'm going to call on people. So
I wouldn't mind volunteering. This is
thank you.
Nicole.
Yeah, no, will be an important piece of that.
Can I clarify too? This will be with the executive committee, right? This is the executive committee sort of taking this on as well. So we'll have the vice chair and the secretary and the lead planning agency and the fiscal agent, I believe, also looking at these.
Okay, okay.
from the last executive committee.
Yeah, and
I'm going to turn
unfortunately,
to the other executive committee members.
yeah, and unfortunately, I was unable to attend that. I thought that the committee was going to bring something back to the executive committee. So I misunderstood. But we do want more of a cross section than just the executive committee participating. We want regular membership participating. So Nicole, will we be calling on you as part of the executive committee? And then I may just send out personal invitations to people to see who wants to be part of that. Many of you went through this rigorously back in 2018 and 19, and some of you it's new to. But this is, I don't think it'll be an onerous process. So with that, our understanding is I will invite some people to be involved, and we will work with the executive committee and come back in June with some suggestions. With that, we will move forward, trying to get us back so that we're out of here about the time we'd like to be. Thera, I believe the next agenda item is the preparing for the RTP.
It is, make sure I'm unmuted. Okay. Yeah, so this is, as I said earlier, when we were talking about the UPWP, we're moving into an update of the regional transportation plan. And you've had a couple of sort of introductory discussions, brief ones in preparing the UPWP. But what I wanted to do at today's meeting with you all is to sort of formally, I'm going to say, launch this with a discussion specifically about the RTP, so that over the next couple of months, we can work with the TAC and come back to you in June with a scope of work. And to do that, what would be really helpful to us as staff, before we get into any of the really nitty-gritty nuts and bolts details about the plan itself, is to just clarify up front or talk through some of your expectations about the regional transportation plan, what you would recognize as a successful plan, or a plan that you would be proud to adopt into just over 2 years. And so to that end, I was sort of I've just posed a few questions in the briefing memo for you all to think about that may help shape what that measure of success looks like. And so, for example, is this a plan, when we write this plan, is this a plan for the public? Are we talking to the public when we write this plan and talk about its recommendations and the issues the region is facing? Or are we talking to WSDOT? Is this really a plan from PRTPO presenting to WSDOT? This is satisfying our state requirements, and here you go, WSDOT, here's our plan. Is it a plan for the members? Is it PRTPO expressing to the members what it, how it sees coordination happening? That's an example of some of these early conversations. If we talk through, if I kind of have a sense of what you all might have in mind about what a good plan looks like, that will help us as we work with the TAC develop a scope of work, so that over the course of the next 2 years, we can deliver a plan that meets this region's needs. I will tell you that as we go into this, our expectation is that we are not updating the old plan. If you followed the link and refreshed your memory about the existing plan, it's a long, long plan. It has a lot of pages and lots of information that is static information. And so as soon as the ink is dry, it's outdated. What we want to do is kind of walk away from that format and go more with the Human Services Transportation Plan format, an online dynamic format that we can keep current. It could have a long shelf life and still be relevant. Are we comfortable with that? Is that, those are the kinds of things I'm just interested in hearing from you all about now, about what you might want to get out of the plan, and what you would hope that we keep in mind as we develop that scope of work that we come back to you with in 2 months. So I think before I just keep talking about that, I thought I'd open it up and see if you all have any early thoughts on the plan or things that you hope we don't do. Please avoid this. Please, please, please don't take us down this path, or things that you might hope that we do, try to emphasize. Do you think we should be talking to the public once at the end, or somehow try to do engagement throughout? What do you think about those things?
Leslie.
Right, I'll jump in. So I consider myself a newcomer to this group. So please keep that in mind with what I'm going to say next. So one thing that would be good for me as a newcomer, if this was a plan kind of directed at its members, is I would love to kind of know a bit about what this planning has achieved in past years, like what has been the focus, what have been some of the big wins or the challenges that haven't been accomplished. That would give me some context to sort of understand where we might go. And then more specifically, I know that there was an effort earlier to sort of promote the idea of the Great American Rail Trail, which crosses 3 counties, and we ended up with a successful, the grant hasn't happened yet, but we ended up with a successful grant putting in for the grant, and Port Townsend has, we're all grateful that Port Townsend is taking the lead on that. And so I personally would like to know, how this group might support that going forward, and B, where does it fall in the sort of range of priorities? Because I can't assume that it's a top priority, but if it turns out it is, I would really love to know that. So those are my thoughts at the moment.
So that's great, and that's exactly the kind of thing, like the kinds of what we'll need to be able to answer going forward. So where have we come from? To understand where we're at, and then to where we might go, and then what kinds of things we want to prioritize. How do we go about identifying regional priorities, and what constitutes those? What does that agreement look like, and how does that play out in the course of a plan? So thank you for that. I appreciate hearing that.
Okay, I'm going to call on Mr. Jackson because I know that he has had thoughts before on resiliency and the need in our plan to address that more thoroughly. You're muted.
I was getting ready to raise my hand, but you beat me to the punch. So, Thera, you said something that kind of stuck with me, and I was trying to digest it. But I think the plan should be written towards DOT, but the public should have not only access to it at certain periods of time, because I think one thing that we lose is that the public is going, what the heck is going on? And I know everybody that's involved in these different projects try to get it out to the public, but as anything else, some people listen, some people don't. So I think as the members, I think it'd be good to direct it towards DOT and then, but have public access to the plan. If that makes sense, that would be something that I know I could direct people to, say, hey, look, this is what's going on. Take a few minutes and take a look. So.
And that does make sense. And Ted, I appreciate you bringing that back up, because I should clarify, it's going to speak to all. Those are 3 audiences we need to hit all around. But if we're talking to Washed Up, we'd probably talk in one tone and one language, and with a level of sophistication, but like subject, we're peers versus, if we're talking to the public about this stuff, and it's going to be, we just talk about things a little bit differently. We present things a little bit differently, but ultimately they all have to be, it has to work for all 3 of those audiences.
I agree. Thank you.
Yeah.
Is there anyone else?
Can I clarify, Beck? I just want to, this is a really important thing to know early on. Is the board comfortable with a completely different format for the plan? It'll be tight. It'll be, as we're thinking about it now, it'll be its primary format will be in an online format with story maps, if you're familiar with what those are. And obviously there'll be something that can be printed because you just always have to have that, but that will not be the intended primary format. You approach plans really differently if you're going to do online or not. And knowing that early on is really helpful. So if there's any uneasiness with that, knowing that now would be helpful before we set out on this.
Okay, Randy had his hand up, so let's listen to Randy.
So I wanted to touch on something that Leslie had said. I'm not sure that it goes into this particular conversation we're having now, but Leslie, we all have been there when it comes to this organization, trying to figure out exactly what they have done in the past, what we are doing now, and what could we possibly do in the future. I know over the years, I've always asked that we actually have training on that, and we might be able to find we can do much more things than we ever imagined, but we've never actually gone through the process to do that. So just to back up what you were saying, as somebody that's been here a long time, I think we should have a workshop in the very near future, especially for our newbies, but for all of us, and then maybe sick Thera on trying to find the different opportunities that we've never considered on the best way to use this tool that is the PRTPO.
Randy, I would love to, if you're supportive of this, we could pick this off for you all with a bit of an overview of what you have to do, and then what are your options for how to do it. Because what I can tell you is that the state law will tell you you need to do this, this, and this, but it doesn't say how to do it. And I think over the last 30 years, what Washington State has come to realize is that how you respond to those state requirements, if you're in a major metropolitan area, is really different than how you respond to those requirements in a rural region such as this. And so we can pretty quickly summarize what the requirements are, and we can look at how we've dealt with those in the past, and then we can lay out some options for you going forwards, just to make sure we're dialing this in appropriately. I don't want to get 2 years from now and you all are supposed to be reviewing a draft plan, and then I hear that you really wanted us to go in a different direction, because we'll sort of be in a tough place then. But we could, that would fit beautifully into sort of the kickoff of this in these first couple of meetings.
Right, and
Well, if we do this right, this can become part of the cover letter, that tells everybody what it is, and then it helps the future teams that are here, because they build off of the little knowledge they know. The monkey learns to put the stick in the hole and pull out a termite. Then the next thing you know is teaching all the other ones, then they go through and find a bigger stick. I'm just saying, in general, if we make that part of it and make it part of the structure, it may help the future ones. And I'll go ahead and unmute now. Thank you.
and those are great ideas. It is important, particularly because we do regularly have new members and we have veteran members. We also want to be clear that this is work for the Regional Transportation Plan, not the UPWP. And those are two very distinct things. And when I heard Randy say about what we do, I see that more in the UPWP than in the Regional Transportation Plan. I do think, and then I just want to, also in your packet was a summary from the investment strategy group that DOT put on, and Randy and I attended that. But we've heard for the last couple of years the word priorities, and all of the RTPOs and MPOs prioritizing. And at that particular session, it was made clear to us that these priorities are not projects, they're policies. And I think that's what we need to address in the RTP, whatever that looks like, whether the audience, whichever one of the three audience you're talking to, they understand what policies have priority for us. Whether it's multimodal or resiliency or just moving people, or public trust, whatever it is, we need to be real clear what our priority policies are. That's what I'd like to see out of it. I also find I would like to try the online format because I believe the format we have now is doesn't hold my interest when I go to read the document. I have trouble getting through some of the sections of the document. So I would like something that, do I want to say more engaging, but is easily understood and not just a list of goals.
That sounds great, Beck.
Yeah, Beck, you're Joe Blow public, and if you don't get through it, then the rest of the people we're giving this to, hoping they will get through it, aren't going to. So
Right.
follow that lead, simple enough. If it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work.
So, is there any more conversation on moving forward with the RTP? Because I think Thera has a presentation for us too that I'm looking, or maybe it's Ed, that I'm looking forward to seeing.
I'll be pulling that up, and it actually feeds right into it. I will warn you all. You're going to have the RTP on your agenda every single meeting for the next 2 years. I'll just tell you that. So we'll have. You can go ahead and count them now. There'll probably be 13. You'll have 13 meetings after this with the RTP on your agenda. So we'll have lots of opportunity. But this is helpful. So what we come back to you with in June is hopefully heading off in the right direction. And yes, Beck, this next agenda item is very much related to this. This supplemental budget that we got, a big chunk of that went to extend our GIS services contract for another year. And what I'm going to show you this morning are some things that we have been working on with them with the existing contract that we have. And what we're working on is to develop a regional profile that allows us to better understand who we are as a region, the people and the places that make up the region. We'll also we haven't gotten there yet, we will also end up with like a transportation atlas that reflects our multimodal transportation system and the network and how it's used and characteristics of it. And then there'll also be what we've actually already got is a bit of a project profile with the RTIP, and we'll talk about that more later as we get into the RTP. But what I'm going to show you this morning are some early prototypes of our demographic dashboard. And so what we envision for
bigger.
Maybe, let's see.
Okay.
I think Beck, I think this is probably about as best
Big as he's going to get. Okay, thank you.
To right now. Let me make sure too, I don't have other weird, oh no, don't end that. Oh dear. Okay, that was close. So this is working with our team. What we're working with right now, again, a little bit more on the way of background, what you're seeing here. We're developing these infographic tools that have census data or other authoritative data behind them that we can easily update over time. We're striving to build something that can have a long shelf life. And I'll go through each of these 3 tabs up here in a moment, but for right now, what we're striving for in this snapshot, this demographic snapshot dashboard is population characteristics, race and ethnicity, age distribution, commuting method. We don't have this pulled in yet, but journey to work data, so where people live and where they're commuting to for work in terms of place and distance that they're traveling, as well as household income. And we'll be interested in like per capita income, median and mean income, but we want to be able to compare it to statewide and maybe regional level, and then also poverty data. This is a fairly high level snapshot, and we'll get to dive in deeper on certain characteristics when we're doing human services transportation planning. But what this will allow users to do, right now we're on the city tab, would be able to pull up. So if Paul is still on, we've got Forks pulled up here right now, so we can sort of see at a glance these characteristics, again with a couple of holes still that we didn't get filled in time. But and by clicking on different cities, you will get different characteristics. So we see suddenly, you know, a lot of difference in age distribution between Forks and Sequim. And if, you know, so you just keep working your way on down. One of the things that jumped out at me with Leslie on Bainbridge Island, boy, looking at the travel characteristics, we've got, you know, almost 25% of Bainbridge Island residents traveling by public transportation, and another 20% working at home based on the 2020 census data. So we're trying to come up with information like this that is easy for you all to access, easy for us to use. Interestingly, on the county side, where this all started was we don't have anything that's really depicts the region. And so while we will have the same thing on the county side, where you can look at Clallam County statistics versus maybe Kitsap County statistics instead of Clallam County. And you'll be able to, you know, just like we could on the city side, pull up individual community characteristics as a whole. What we'll also be able to do on the county side is to create a total picture of the region, and we'll come up with a better way of doing this so it's not quite so clunky, but that we can, right now, the only way to tell the peninsula region is you pull out a spreadsheet and you drop all the data in it for each of the 4 counties and you sum it all up, and there's our picture of the peninsula region. And what this is intended to do is allow us to, at a snapshot, be able to also compare the region, or sometimes we know that we need to separate Kitsap away from, you know, we're all a rural region, but Kitsap is our more like our rural partner, and the other 3 counties are our highly rural partners, and sometimes we need that kind of data as well. So so this is what we're working on right now. We also have, for the tribes, we have located the census data for the tribes. I am keenly aware that for different tribes, the way that their land is organized and considered by the census, that it can create anomalies in the data. And so we will be working real closely with each of the tribes in the region, not just our members, but all 10 tribes, to make sure that the data is appropriate for use as is, or does it need qualifications? So we will follow up with the tribes to make sure that that data is appropriate for use for them, but we did not want to just overlook them. On the city side, the other thing I wanted to point out here as well is that in addition to having information for each of the cities, and we'll have to change this label, like I said, you're looking at a work in progress. We'll change the label, but we also have information on unincorporated. So the team that's building this for us is going through the data sets and doing the analysis on the back end to be able to, wherever possible, distinguish between incorporated versus unincorporated, because I think we all know in our communities what the options are that are available to us, or the demographic characteristics in our cities are oftentimes quite different from once you get outside of the cities. And so we want to, again, be able to see at a glance the population characteristics, say like in unincorporated Clallam County, and be able to look at that, distinguish from Clallam County as a whole, or pick your county on that. So we're working to get that all put together. There will be certain aspects of the data that won't lend itself to that sort of delineation, but as much of it as we can, we will. The other thing I will share with you is that we are when it's operational, a user could come in here and not only be able to see, like get information out of the graphics themselves, but they'll also be able to download the data if they wanted to do more sophisticated analyses than we've sort of hardwired our system to do. But we're going to start pretty small and simple, and PRTPO itself won't get into a lot of analysis, but we know that some of our members might want to be able to do it. We want to make that as easy as possible. So I just wanted to give you a little preview of these tools that we're building. We're going to build these right into the regional transportation plan. We learned with the human services transportation plan that we started exploring with how you pull the data into the story map, but I think we're going to take it to the next level with the RTP, and we'll have your profile will have this demographic data, and then we'll also show you next month some mapping tools that we're working on, where you'll be able to maybe look at a bus stop and pull up the demographic data associated with that stop, or a crosswalk, or, you know, so as you heard in your grant applications, you oftentimes are having to answer equity questions. And so we want to make sure that your staff have access as best as we can to information that pulls from these equity tools and gives them as easy a way as possible to answer these equity questions for the road projects or services or whatever that they're applying for grants for. So we're keeping that in mind as well as we're building this. So what its applicability might be for our local members. So I'm gonna, well, before I stop sharing, let me just ask if there are any questions or anything in particular somebody might want to ask me if I can do with our, you know, little small bag of tricks here. I am not a technologically inclined person. So the team that's doing this for us, I guess they're figuring if I can figure out how to do it, that I am sort of the litmus test. So if I can do it theoretically, any of you all should be able to access anything on here. So, but happy to answer any questions before I quit screen sharing here. I'll stop screen sharing. So that's just a little preview, and you'll see bits and pieces more of that as we go forward, and we'll, like I said, we're looking to build this into the fabric of the RTP, and the data that we're using. It's not as simple as pushing a button, but it's almost as simple as pushing a button to keep it refreshed so that 5 years from now, this will still have value. It'll still be relevant because it'll have the most current and updated data populating it going forwards. So that's my spiel, Beck.
Any comments? I thought it was exciting. But then I get excited about stuff like that, you know?
I mean, I feel like I might use that in non-transportation areas. That seems like it's really fairly easy to access and use.
Oh, I was thinking the same thing. Marty?
Yeah, I just want to say that looks like a really good resource. So nice work there.
Great.
Yeah, and I'm looking forward to seeing it put on the map board so that we can see these things visually. Yeah. I mean, I think like I said, in a word, exciting. Yeah. And very useful. And yeah, sometimes we hire consultants to get us this information, and it'll be nice to have them at our fingertips.
Save that money for the more complicated stuff. Yes.
Right. Exactly. That is pretty cool. And somehow I think we managed to get back on schedule. So it would now be time for your coordinator's report. Do you have anything you want to bring us up to speed on, Thera?
I would just encourage people to take a look at it. If you did not get the message already, WashDOT has changed this. You got the briefing last month from Steve Rourke. about the closure for 4 weekends in the peak of summer. They've changed that. I cannot imagine, everything that they went through to do that, but they're approaching the construction project of the Hood Canal Bridge differently. So please, there's a link to the updated information in the coordinator's report. And if you're not already on the distribution list from WashDOT, I encourage you to get on it. They've got some great information for keeping people current on what's going on in the North Olympic Peninsula this summer. The other thing that I would point out to you is that the Safe Streets for All funding program is open right now. There's several funding programs that are open right now. As you heard from Stephen, it'll be rare for me to tell you some month that there's not a funding program open for the foreseeable future. But the Safe Streets for All, I wanted to call to your attention because this is a federal grant, but it is for projects for all multimodal safety projects. It doesn't have to be, just pedestrian or just bike or, roadway projects, expensive projects, small projects. It also pays for safety plans. And so Washington State scored extremely well the last go round last year. Washington State brought home over $9 million in planning grants. And we brought home more money than anybody other than California, Texas, and Florida by a lot. So I think it's just sort of our state's own attitude about multimodal transportation. We're well positioned, and USDOT expects to fund hundreds of planning projects in this next year. And excuse me, and dozens of big expensive implementation projects. $1.8 billion is the funding in this next go round, and it just gets bigger going forward. So take a look at that. If this year's not your year, think about it for next year. The only other thing I'll share with you is that wearing a different hat in my work with the Planning Association of Washington, I'm helping to organize a planners forum for communities that are going to be introducing hydrogen into their communities, and what do current planners need to be thinking about now in terms of permitting, environmental approval, things like that, to make sure that those hydrogen projects, when they hit the counter, that they keep moving. For a lot of our communities, at least in the South Sound, we don't have any experience with that. And so we're working with folks from the Renewable Hydrogen Alliance, other folks from Commerce, and others to put together a planners forum. And if anybody's interested, let me know and I will make sure invitations get out to your staff. And that will be in late May or early June. We're trying to nail down the date now. So I think that's it, unless people have questions on this report. Thanks.
Any questions? Any comments? We will then open for public comment. I don't know if we have any public available to comment.
We had nobody show up at the Kitsap Transit office, and it looks like Nick has dropped off out of the audience.
Okay, thank you. With that, we will close the public comment period and go to RPTO member updates. And in this area, I want to acknowledge and express appreciation to Kitsap Transit for their help and assistance with the Washington State ferries of transporting, I think it was over 600 passengers off the Walla Walla that went aground in Rich Passage over the weekend. Kitsap Transit demonstrated what resiliency is all about, and the coordination and cooperation with another agency. So John, give all of your guys a big kudos from us. Yeah, great job. Great job. And is there anyone else who has comments? Anything you want to share about your jurisdiction this morning? Okay, you're on, Ed.
Something.
Oh, just a second. Ed was waving. We'll let Ed talk and then you talk, Randy.
No problem.
First, I apologize for missing most of the meeting. It fell directly on my public works board responsibilities. So I apologize. I tried to be here promptly. Just to let everyone know, on the groundbreaking Highway 305 roundabout, between Winslow and Paulsbo Hood Canal Bridge. The dedication will be in June, originally April, then May, now June. And it will include the installation of probably one of the most high-profile public art pieces in the state, right in the middle of the state route, which will incorporate major elements of Suquamish tribal inheritance and art, along with the more Scandinavian immigrant art. And some of you might have seen it. It's over 14 feet high. It's three-dimensional wrought iron sculpture. In the center of the roundabout, it will have stained glass maple leaves that'll light up at night. It's going to be very amazing. And Michael Bateman, as soon as they get a hard date, can maybe extend the appropriate invitation to our group. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll do Randy and then we'll go to Marty.
So back in Thera, we attended that meeting a while back with the RTPOs and with the state, and we wondered whether or not it was valuable and whether or not it was beneficial. I wanted to share with you another outcome from that meeting. You all know that we take advantage of opportunities. That's one of the things we have to do as elected from this. And has been an issue, and they were looking at putting it out to 2031 to start, which basically shuts it down because it's only got a 5-year window. You have to commission the project, basically. Our legislators have got it back into their budgets, but the governor, of course, can still do what they need to do. So we had that meeting that we attended, and we met the person that was actually steering the ship. We could hear from his words where it was all coming from. Do you remember Secretary Millar? He went ahead and he was so gracious that he ended up giving me a meeting. I wanted to tell you the outcome of that meeting. That gentleman was very upfront with where he was coming from, and safety was his big issue, and we went over all that. He gave me not just the time I needed for my project. We ended up going everything over my region, and when it was done, he also expressed he was calling the director to let them know if anything gets in front of this project to give him a call immediately. He definitely is a supporter because of the safety aspects. They had just been being sold on the economic development aspects, but that one meeting parlayed into probably one of the most important meetings my county's had. So I just wanted to let you know that. Thank you for having me go to that, because I don't know, that was wonderful. So I think if it comes up again, I'll go.
I'm just going to interject here. Randy is one of the few people I know that has no hesitation to going right up to Secretary Millar and saying, hey, I want to talk to you. And he got his meeting, and it sounds like it was very successful. Thanks, Randy. You also, I know, and that was one of the highlights of the meeting we attended, was the networking that was done. So anyway, Marty, we'll let you speak.
Yeah, I just wanted to update on let you guys know that our construction agreement was approved by WSDOT a couple days ago. So now I just have to go out for advertisement on it. It's a smaller project, sidewalk project that we're doing out here on SR 106 and Reservation Road. So it will complete that sidewalk. It's been incomplete for a long time. It just dead ends, and the kids use that to go to school. And just making it more safer for our kids and pedestrians that like to walk on the sidewalks and things. So just wanted to.
You've been working on that for a long time.
Yeah, a couple years now.
Yeah,
it was behind.
Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It was behind schedule, so we had to kind of prolong the project, I guess.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else that we want to share about what your jurisdictions are doing? John.
Yeah, I just very briefly, Kids Up Transit, of course, we're looking at the feasibility of hydrogen, putting in electrolyzer and fuel cell technology. So I just wanted to share that, as well as there, if you could put us on the list as well. I'd definitely like to be a part of your workshop. So thank you.
Perfect. Vicky?
Thank you, Beck. So just an update for everyone. Our funding for the multimodal improvements on the Warren Avenue Bridge, when the governor's draft budget came out, we were slated for what we thought would be construction years of 25, 26, 27. And then when it went to the legislature, it got pushed out past 2029. So we are going to continue forward in hopes that our lobbyist next year can, and the next budget adjustment, they'll be able to try to get it pulled back. But just FYI that we were disappointed in that, but we're going to keep moving forward and hope that we can secure it in next year. Thanks.
Vicki, that is exactly what Randy was talking about with his freight corridor issue down on Highway 3. And I know the folks in Clallam County and the Simdar road intersection, they're facing the same things. It's been pushed out significantly. And we learned a lot at that meeting we went to about how things enter the governor's budget. It was, and anyway, again, I thank Randy for being the advocate he is for Mason County and obtaining or getting his meeting directly with Millar to Secretary Millar to move that forward. He did great work. Randy, you want to speak again?
Yeah, I think we actually created a relationship here that will be able to come together and use for other things, not just Mason County. Beck, of all people, you remember when I was partially instrumental of creating another group that we did called the West Sound Alliance, where we pulled together. It may be in time to do that again with the organizations that we're all serving with on this board, and make sure that these projects are taken care of in the future for the next year or so. So maybe we should come together and have that conversation, you and me, and start to bring others in.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's kind of do that offline so that we have something reasonable to present to the group, because I think it's a collaboration that could be useful for everyone long term. So is there anything else for our group this morning? If not, we will stand adjourned and we will see everyone in June. And in June, we will be approving our UPWP and becoming more engaged with the creation of our new regional transportation plan. Again, I thank you all, and I particularly thank those who had comments and questions today. It's very helpful for our group when there's engagement. And I have received a couple of notes from people who want to be on the bylaw committee. So they knew I was going to call them anyway. So expect to hear from me. And we'll see everybody in June.
Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.